So, Zach, we wanted to kick off our personalization topic today with personalization of push notifications. And as you know, we've talked about what a good push notification or a bad push notification looks like in the past. So, we felt like this was a great place to kick off with our personalization episode.
Topic. I've always said a push notification is very personal because you're effectively texting your customers, right? Anyone who has your app. So you have to be cautious because it's an easy channel to abuse. And I think we've got some great examples of that today, Gabe. But what kind of push notifications have you seen lately?
Yeah, I wanted to share this example because I've talked a lot about DoorDash in the past and compared DoorDash to some of the other applications that you would use for ordering food to get delivered to your house. And I feel like DoorDash is really pretty garbage when it comes to push notifications, and especially around the personalization of those. So what I've seen recently, though, is that they've started to mix in a bit more personalization. So I looked at my phone and I had 4 push notifications from DoorDash within the last few days. 3 of them were just unpersonalized crap. It was basically just sign up for Dash Pass, get 50% off. That was the entire message. The last one I got, though, was personalized in 3 ways, which I thought was really interesting. So the first thing is they said, "Hi, Gabe." So first thing first, they got my name stuck in there. Good job by them. And the second thing that they did is they talked about trying a new restaurant that I hadn't ordered from before. And because they have my order history, they know that I haven't ordered from this particular place. So they suggested a restaurant. It was a Mambo's Pizza was the one that they threw out there. And so that was kind of the second piece of personalization, personalizing to something that I hadn't tried before. But the third thing was a local restaurant that I hadn't tried before. And I thought that was really interesting. So they got 3 pieces of personalization in a fairly tight push notification window where, with a relative small number of characters, they were able to get 3 pieces of personalization in there. I thought that was quite good.
I'm coming to your house for dinner tonight. It sounds like we can DoorDash. But
Mambo's Pizza is pretty good. It's pretty solid pizza.
How many viewers do you think we'd lose if I said I'm not a big pizza fan? Not that I would say that, but
I made this joke earlier to you, or maybe it was yesterday, but I feel like you're just full of unpopular opinions, and nobody is surprised at this point when you have an unpopular opinion.
And that one's not totally true. There's some pizzas I don't like, but I'll be honest with you. I'm not going to shy away, but it's actually funny because we just last week I was telling you about the Taco Bell app, and I think every day I've gotten a notification from this Taco Bell app, and it's at a point now where my next step is to delete the app. I do not like being overwhelmed, especially in the Taco Bell case. That's a restaurant, if I can call it that I go to maybe once a year, right? It's not like something I'm thinking of every day of the week. So the fact that even today, I've got a 2x points on the Cantina chicken menu, that notification on my phone, that's useless to me. Not only is that something I'm not interested in based on my past purchases at Taco Bell, but again, it's Friday. That's the 5th notification I've gotten this week. So it goes back to when you're putting your message on your subscribers' phones, 1, don't abuse the channel, but 2, personalize the messaging. And this is a very sad example, but I have 2 notifications on my phone right now. The other one is from my fridge, and it's telling me to change the water filter. I feel like that's fairly personalized.
That is pretty personalized. I mean, you're taking that data from inside your home and actually sending a push notification around that. And, but that's actually kind of a helpful notification. I'll take that one. I certainly see the same thing from my cameras, when the battery gets low and things like that. Those are ones that are actually beneficial and helpful. So I don't mind those as much. But your point about abusing the channel, I think, is one that's really, really important because, as marketers, I think it's really important for us to consider the frequency of communication, especially over a specific channel like push, that is very personal to your phone. We are all staring at our screens all the time. And so it is a very valuable channel if you can get somebody to download your app, have the ability to communicate with them in that way. But I think you got to be really thoughtful around how you're communicating with folks. Another example I was talking to you earlier about, Zach, was the Starbucks app. And we've talked about that in previous episodes too. I got to be honest, I'm pretty surprised at the lack of personalization and the lack of just relevance and frequency of updates that I get from the Starbucks app. It's not as good as I would have expected, given what I would consider Starbucks a very sophisticated company when it comes to data and marketing, and I've been unpleasantly surprised at the lack of personalization in their push notifications.
I would say they have a lot of data too. I go to Starbucks like once a year for like a frappuccino, if even, or if I'm traveling, it's always like something quick to drink, lemonade, and maybe something to eat. But I've never received a personalized notification based on my past purchases. So, if they knew that I wasn't drinking coffee, or if they knew I was buying things from their bakery, that's kind of a notification they could do. Or even when you are traveling, right? You could use things like geo services to identify where the subscriber's at. I have plenty of apps on my phone that do that. Every time I'm flying, one of my flight apps says like, hey, welcome to this airport kind of thing, has my departures, arrivals, useful information. And that's like my favorite one, just because of how useful the information actually is. Like, you can tap in and you can see incoming flights, outgoing flights, things like that. So there's a lot of different ways to personalize not only the content but the experience itself for the user. And that's one of the things we want to talk about today is personalization in marketing, and why it's very important to do.
Yeah, I have a colleague who always says that the sweetest sound is what is it? Now I'm forgetting the quote. It's the sweetest sound is your own name, basically, right? It's some version of that. And with personalization, you're being able to really speak to somebody in a very personal way using, it sounds silly, but even just their name is a great way to increase the likelihood that they're going to engage with whatever piece of marketing content you're putting out there, whether it is a push notification, an email, or whatever. And I realize that seems very basic. Like, that seems like it should be total baseline of, if I'm going to communicate with somebody, I should probably use their name. But I still see a lot of marketing out there, Zach, that ends up in my inbox or on my phone screen that doesn't have any information about me, even when it's a company that I have provided that information to.
It's funny, Gabe, because at a high level, I talk with my hands a lot on this podcast, and I feel like most of our listeners can't see that, which I just think is funny. But on a high level, I'll do it again. I feel like a lot of marketers, they add that name to the subject line field or add the name to the email, and they say, great, this is personalized.
Yeah, it's like that's it, right? And then the personalization is done.
Yeah, it's like, hey, Gabe, here's a 25% discount off a purchase you're not even interested in. So, what this goes back to is personalization is one of the top tactics you can use to increase your engagement rates, whether it's an email, a social ad, really any channel. We talked about push notifications already, but there's so many ways you can personalize the content beyond just the name. So we'll talk about the data, the experience, and things like that today. But the key message here is personalize beyond that name.
Well, and one of the things that jumped out to me when we did the episode a couple episodes ago around the research paper that we had found is that your generation, the generations even below yours, really expect personalization in a very specific way. So that is as those folks become, our standard consumers, right? They're going to expect that even more than potentially folks in my generation or older. So really, really important for you to figure that out in your marketing if you are, going to start selling goods and services to a younger demo.
Totally. And we talked about how personalization is the number one way to increase engagement rates. Well, what are the rest of the ways? So number two was segmenting. Gabe, this is something we do every day. And it goes back to personalization, really, is what segment do you want to target? How do you want to target? And what message will best resonate with that subscriber or with that prospect, that customer of yours as well? How are you segmenting your data? Gabe, one of the common conversations we have is when you have an older demographic and a younger demographic, maybe it's an older or retired couple or a family, you can't use the same message with them, right? That message isn't going to resonate in the same ways. There may be different features of your product that one group is interested in and the other is not. And this is where that segmenting comes in, again, with that personalization.
Well, to me, it drives the personalization. And to use another push notification example, I was looking at my phone earlier today and I have a bunch of notifications from Amazon, and they are about having my kids buy a gift for my wife for Mother's Day. And so Amazon is able to personalize that message to me based on segmentation. So they're segmenting, they know I have kids, so they've segmented me off in this group. They know I'm married, so they further segment me into another group. They know Mother's Day is coming, so now I'm further segmented into another group. So they continue to segment based off of this data that they have, and then they're able to personalize that message. And it kind of reminded me like, oh yeah, I probably do need to get the kids to buy my wife something for Mother's Day.
Thanks for the reminder, Gabe.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder, Amazon. It's actually, that's a situation where personalization and segmentation is actually really helpful, because then the notification that comes to me is actually relevant for something that I need to do.
And the next two items I think relate, not to skip over one, but number 3 is mobile friendly content. This is something that has been, I don't want to say a huge issue, but I remember like 10 years ago, back in my prime, like, do you remember this, Gabe, when like not every website was mobile friendly, or like things would just break on your phone? I feel like we've, for the most part, optimistically speaking, we've gotten past that.
I think that's true. I feel like most sites at this point are quite responsive to mobile, but there's a difference between being responsive to mobile and being mobile first, and thinking about how your customers are engaging and making sure that your website, or however they're engaging with you, is actually really a mobile first process, right? And this, I know we've talked about this tool before also, but just to dive into it for a moment.
Can I guess the
Clarity.
tool? Oh, I knew it. I was gonna guess Clarity.
Yeah.
We should have bet on that.
I know we should have bet on that, but yeah, I would have lost for sure. Well, yes, I love Clarity because it can tell you it. I realize there's other tools that can tell you this too, but what I really like about Clarity is it will give you the insight into what the people are doing as they're coming to your site, right? How they're getting there, what technology they're using, but it will also tell you how they're engaging with the site once they get there, and most importantly, I think, especially for mobile, how far they're scrolling down, right? That scroll map is so important to understand how far people are actually scrolling, and making sure that if you are building mobile friendly, whether it's mobile friendly email or mobile friendly website, how engaged are people with that content, and how much are they even actually looking at and reading.
And this is going to be a hot take. Why not? We already had one today, but when you think of where your web traffic is coming from, using a tool like Clarity, you may see like, 70% is coming from mobile. Only 30% are visiting on the desktop. I think of Apple's website, and the thing I used to hate about Apple's website, and I don't think it's as bad, but they used to do like these cool like product building animations where like it would, like, as you scroll, it would like build the product, put it together. You would be scrolling for miles, and after like 3 minutes of scrolling, I'd be like, I'm not interested. I came to look for information. I've scrolled for this, probably a short amount of time, a couple of seconds, and it's not there, right? So it goes back to, what is that experience? And again, if you're optimizing for mobile, optimizing for desktop, just make sure that content is appropriately adapted.
Yeah,
which leads us into our next email-related one, and that's email automation. Automating the messages you send out. Hey, Gabe, I'm a big fan of this, not only for like operational efficiency here, but it just keeps things from slipping through the cracks. If you have a new customer coming on, you don't have to think twice. It just automatically sends this new journey out. And then combined with data you may have on where this customer is at in their journey itself, you can target them with the correct message at the correct time. I love email automation.
I know you've spent a lot more time building email automation than I have, and I know you're a huge fan, and obviously I understand the reasons why you would want to do that, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It just takes so much off a marketer's plate, where they have to worry about sending the appropriate email at the right time. Let the system do that for you, and let the system build it out for you based on how your customers are interacting with the content that you're sending out to. And again, these may seem like fairly basic things, but we still see a lot of situations, Zach, where people are not thinking about what are these triggers that could be used to build in automations. I just signed up for a new internet service provider last week, and you know what they've been doing? They've been communicating to me ever since I signed up about how I can use my new service, and I've gotten a handful of kind of welcome emails through this journey, and it's quite good. I have to say I'm pretty impressed with how frequently they're sending me emails, which is not too frequently, and the information that they're sending out as part of that welcome process as well. And I know that's fully automated. I know there's not somebody who's sitting there waiting for, okay, it's day 5, we need to send Gabe an email now. You know, it's a fully automated process, and there's still so much that can be done there.
I agree. I'm just thinking of how bad of a job that would be. I imagine an Excel spreadsheet with a list of dates and someone, you know, going through and segmenting manually.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Automate that. That's a bad gig. Going back to personalization, though, one of the things we know is that consumers are more likely to purchase from a personalized experience. So having that data helps you. But on the flip side of that, having, you know, a poor data quality is going to impact your ability to personalize messaging, you know, send that automated email out, things of that nature as well. So you have to have good data to personalize your message and make sure that it sends out at the right time.
I'm trying to think about, you know, what would be like the handful of just really baseline things that you would want to know as a marketer so that you could personalize. You know, certainly name, probably birth date, time when the customer first made a purchase from you. If it's somebody who's going and buying multiple things, what those things are. Like what are some of the other like just absolute baseline, we've got to have this data things that you can think of, Zach?
I feel like that's a good start. I mean, think of like when you sign up for a new website, a new service, a new streaming app might be a good one because it's Spotify where you kind of like select music you like and then they personalize that experience. But this is data. It's also called zero party data, which we'll talk about, you know, today as well. But this is this is data that the customer is intentionally and in most cases proactively sharing with you.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good one. I hadn't thought about the streaming. When you sign up for a streaming service, whether it's Spotify or Netflix or, you know, Disney Plus or whatever, when you first sign up, they ask you those questions about what it is that you want, so then they can tailor that experience. Well, I guarantee you they're tracking all of that data from when you initially signed up and also kind of watching how that probably changes over time, right? But that type of information is incredibly valuable to be able to personalize that experience to your customer.
Another two examples I can think of is Reddit and Twitter both do that. You know, who do you want to follow? What subreddit communities do you want to subscribe to? And then they make recommendations off that. I feel like my subreddits are very tech heavy. You know, that's what I'm interested in, obviously. Yeah. But again, my experience from creating that account 10 years ago now, which I think is true actually for Reddit, is tailored based off of all of that information I initially gave in that sign up, and of course how I use the platform today. But it just shows how personalizing that experience. I mean, I've been using Reddit for 10 years now. It's kept me in the loop. Twitter too. I don't know how long I've been using Twitter, or X as it's now called, but that experience continues to adapt based on how I use the platform. Even the notifications I get now are based on, Gabe, you may see some of these as well, accounts you follow. You may also be interested in, you know, John Doe. So there's different notifications like that personalized on your experience.
You know who is terrible at that? Is the suggestions of who you should follow. You can take a shot at this.
If you say Threads, I might cry.
Not Threads. LinkedIn. LinkedIn is horrible at making suggestions of who you should follow. I've noticed this in the notifications that for whatever reason, they constantly suggest athletes to me. Like I'm constantly getting thrown Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, Cam Newton, like all these random athletes that I don't follow any athletes on LinkedIn. I don't know why they continue to suggest that I should follow said athletes on LinkedIn. It almost feels like they're paying for they're paying to have them to try and get more followers. I don't know. It's very strange.
I will say LinkedIn notifications in general are
they're pretty bad.
I was trying to say it nicely. The one that bothers me the most is like, you know, 50 people viewed your profile. My first reaction to that is, why do I care? Like, who cares? And it's like pay to get gold to see who, and I'm like, I can't imagine paying for that specific feature. Now, there's other features you get with LinkedIn Gold or Premium, whatever they call that. But
Premium.
The,
So I will tell you, I signed up for Premium for a month because
did you get the trial?
I did. I did the trial. They finally got me with the trial. So,
Me too.
and the reason I did it is because as I'm trying to connect with people on LinkedIn, like I have a meeting with people and then I want to reach out to them and I want to connect with them so, we can stay in touch and moving forward, right? And then I can post our podcast and, hopefully get them to listen. Wouldn't that be lovely? But you can't, you can only personalize a certain number of messages out to people if you don't have Premium. So I had a situation a few months ago where I had sent a bunch of notifications out to people, still personalized, but I ran out of free personalized messages. So I was like, fine, I'm going to sign up for Premium for a month for the trial just to see what it works, see how it works. It was honestly I cannot believe what they charge people for that. I was stunned at how poor quality the experience was and how little additional benefit they give you. And it ain't cheap. I think it's like $30 something a month. It's nuts.
I just love where this conversation
Yeah, we just went off the rails.
talking about LinkedIn. It's such like an adult thing to talk about. Like, moving on.
Yes, moving on. We should move on. But I'll wrap it up just by saying this: the notifications that they send to you don't feel personal at all. Versus what you're saying with Reddit or X or Threads or whatever, where they're actually suggesting relevant people based on who it is that you follow. And that's where I think LinkedIn really falls down in personalizing that outreach. And they want you connecting with more people because it's going to keep you in the platform. And I think they've really missed the boat there in trying to get you to connect with people that would actually make sense.
I have nothing more to add to LinkedIn.
Okay, we'll move on.
I will say I love how much, and I do blame you, Gabe, like how often I check LinkedIn now. It's like, I'll log in and see this notification, or we post our podcast to LinkedIn, so we talk about it a little bit there. But 10 years ago, I don't think you could have convinced me that I'd ever be like the person on LinkedIn. But like here I am.
My sister gives me a hard time because she says it's the social media platform I use the most, which she is not wrong. So
oh, she's totally right. I know that. But
Yeah.
I have a friend and he doesn't have a LinkedIn. And I remember like a few months ago we were playing Xbox, and I was like, how do you not have a LinkedIn? Like how do you not have? We got to get you a LinkedIn, right? And I feel like that's what happened to like Facebook. A decade, 2 decades ago, where it's like, oh, you don't have a Facebook? We got to get you a Facebook kind of thing. So here we are, professional.
I'm going to make one more comment on LinkedIn, and then I promise I will shut up about it.
Okay.
The funniest thing that I think you might have ever sent me was a joke about LinkedIn. You were talking about these are the people that viewed your profile, and I think it was from Marketing Millennials, and the joke was, 50 people have viewed your profile, and then you click on the thing, and it was the Kim Kardashian when she wore the completely covered up dress with the face mask and everything, and I just thought that was hysterical. That was such a good joke.
I just love the fact that I'm sending memes on LinkedIn now. That's a high
This is
point.
your life.
I love it.
All right,
personalized experiences.
now we really need to shift gears. Yes.
Yeah, so personalized experiences outside of LinkedIn.
Yes.
Why should you be personalizing things? And the best example we have here, maybe not the best, but top of mind given the I think they just released their Q1 earnings this week, but Netflix. Gabe, this is one I know you've talked about in the past on how they personalize their experience for subscribers. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So this is one where, I think it's topical just given that Netflix just announced their earnings. And one of the things that they mentioned when they released their earnings is that they're actually going to stop reporting subscriber counts and subscriber growth, which I thought was really interesting because that's really a key metric for them in forecasting future revenue and just a general understanding of how their business is doing. But they said that's not a relevant metric for us anymore. What's a more relevant metric is engagement. How much time people spend on our platform. That's the thing that they're going to start reporting on going forward, besides the general, revenue and profit and, gross margins and all that good stuff, right? That they have to report. But when they talk about specific metrics that are driving the company forward, it's engagement, it's time spent on the platform. So what that tells me is that they're going to be even more thoughtful about the recommendation engine, because the more time people spend on the platform, the more engagement that is going to result in, and the better it's going to be for them financially, because those are the things that they're going to continue to push out to the street. And they do a really good job. I forget what the percentage is, Zach. I want to say it's like 90%. It's an insane percentage of consumption on Netflix happens through the recommendation engine. It's a very, very, very high percentage. So what that means is that those recommended videos that, you know, sit there in the kind of middle section of your Netflix queue, that drives like 90% of traffic on the platform. So that's why it's so important for them to get those recommendations right and make sure that they are using the data about what you have consumed, not just what you've watched, but what you've watched all the way through. If it's a season, have you watched the whole season? Those sorts of things. Those are really key metrics that they track.
Tonight I'm going to log into Netflix and I will browse the recommendations. If Hot Rod was on there, I'd watch that, no doubt. But I always love to see what kind of content is recommended, or it's because you watched this, you might be interested in this. I always get tied up in the recommendations, especially when you're looking for something new to watch. Maybe you just finished Breaking Bad for the fifth time, or what's next. So I do love those recommendations. That is actually how I started watching The Crown on Netflix. Very good show if you haven't watched it. But I didn't know anything about this show until it became a recommendation based on something I previously watched. Or on the other side of that, there's a guy who makes, I don't really know what category this would be, but like thriller kind of things maybe. His name's Mike Flanagan. But every year he comes out with a new series. And as soon as they come out, it says, like this year was, because you watched Midnight Mass, here's Fall of the House of Usher. And again, It was a great show based on a previous recommendation. And what's that doing, Gabe? It's increasing my time spent on Netflix. So that's a great example of how you can use data to personalize that experience.
Yep, absolutely. I think those are great examples for sure.
The next one is quite, I don't want to say it's simple because I feel like not enough people do this, but it helps you create better content. Users are more likely to convert to your business or buy your product, buy your service, if they have a personalized offer in front of them.
Yeah, I'll use a somewhat real life example from kind of our real jobs in this one, Zach. But one of the things that I talk about a lot for kind of regular work is how people are framing up the benefits that they're going to get from switching broadband service providers. And the example that I give a lot is, if you're targeting somebody with a gamer message or a work from home message as an example, Zach and I are both people who work remotely. Well, if a broadband service provider has done the right thing and put a campaign in front of us that speaks to how their broadband service is going to benefit us while we're working remotely, while we're recording a podcast, and making sure that we have the best possible quality and it's uploading quickly and all of those sorts of things. When I click on that ad, if I'm taken back to a website that doesn't speak at all to what I just saw in that personalized ad, then the content has sort of fallen apart. So I've at least got kind of like half the content story right, but not the full content story right of I clicked on the ad and then I got driven back to a landing page and now it's just telling me about a 500 meg internet service and it ends up being very generic. So that's a bit where I think the content piece, the personalization helps you create the content, but it also helps you create an end-to-end content through line, I guess, for lack of a better term, that allows you to be consistent in that message across the entire thing.
And that leads into our last item here and why you should personalize. And I have another broadband example to give, but it humanizes your business. I have fiber from a local provider and a big name telecom, which I won't drop the name, but 3 times a week I get a generic piece of mail that says, hey, like no name, no personalization, nothing about me, no idea how I use my internet. There's nothing. There's no personalization. They just say 500 megabits per second for $39 a month. And that means nothing to me. One, I know it's not fiber, so I don't want to touch that. Gabe, I use the example when we used to upload these podcasts, it would take, an hour or two because my upload speed was 10 megabits per second. And now 1 gig symmetrical takes 3 minutes, if even, video plus audio. But these promotions I get in the mail and even like the digital ads I see have nothing to do with with anything, it's just speed and price. There's no personalization. There's no messaging that resonates. They're clearly not segmenting. All this BSP is doing is saying, hey, we have service to this address. Let's blanket them with the same message we use all across America. There's nothing being done there.
Yeah, I guess I'll use another broadband example. I'm going to steal this from my boss. I heard her use this one in a meeting we were in a few weeks ago, and I thought it was a great one. So she gets a message all the time that talks about adding a line to her family plan. Well, she doesn't have kids. It's her and her husband, and that's it. And they already have service from this particular cellular provider. And so she's like, "Why are you sending me messages about adding children to my phone plan when I have no children?" But she said, if you were to send me a similar message that talked about how, make sure that a Zoom call never drops, make sure that you have the best possible experience when you're working remotely. It's like, here, take my money. I couldn't pay you enough for that. But because they completely have missed the mark on the messaging, it's falling on deaf ears. And if anything, it's almost infuriating her more than anything, because the message is not only not personalized, but actively not personalized, because it just doesn't speak to her at all about based on where her life is.
Totally. And all this personalization talk goes back to, where do you get the data to personalize your messaging? And that's kind of the last segment we want to talk about today. And the number one thing here is I'm going to talk about cookies. And if you tuned in last week, it's not Crumble, so we'll set that episode aside for another day. But if you don't know, cookies are being eliminated from Google Chrome and Firefox throughout the year. So this is something they've been testing. They're gone. So how are you collecting data to personalize your messaging, or where are you buying this data? And we talked a little bit a few minutes ago about that zero-party data, that information that you're collecting, your customers are sharing proactively. Maybe you have a landing page with a form that your customers can fill out. That's all data you can use to personalize your marketing. And again, avoid falling into that pit of generic, vague messaging that doesn't resonate with anyone.
Mm-hmm. I think it speaks to something you brought up earlier, Zach, which is you really need to be thoughtful about the questions that you're asking when somebody signs up for your service. You talked about Reddit and X/Twitter, asking you recommendations about who you want to follow, and then leveraging that information throughout the entire journey with you. It's the same thing. What are if I were trying to get data from people, my goal would be to, when they decide to make a purchase from me, get as much relevant information as I can. You don't want to ask too many questions. If you ask 20, you're probably going to get 0. But if you ask 5 really good questions, you're probably going to get most people to provide that information, especially if they're making a purchase from you. So what are those really important questions that you need to ask to get that, to your point, zero-party data of information that people are intentionally and proactively sharing with you as a company, so you can personalize that experience and make it better for them as you're moving forward?
And the other part of that conversation too, and this is a metric from HubSpot that I thought was interesting, but it says 26% of marketers said data increases the ROI of their marketing efforts. But on the flip side of that, only 1 in 4 said that data is integrated in their tools today. So the other part of this conversation is, where are you keeping this data? How are you using it? And that last part, how does it integrate into MailChimp, HubSpot, whatever your email platform is? How does that integrate? How does this all come together? And you know me, Gabe, I'm big on data hygiene and making sure it's clean, organized, and everything. But as you collect this data from landing pages, from your website, Facebook Pixel just kind of flows into its own spot too. But all of these different data sources, how are you housing this? And then how are you actually using this with the tools you use every day? If you're sending out mobile notifications, how are you, getting that data there? If you're using email platforms, how are you using that data you've collected in your emails? Or are they isolated? Are they siloed? Because that's a problem in itself.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a great point. And I think this is where a lot of marketers fall down with using data, is that hygiene and the just ability to maintain it on a go-forward basis. It does become complex, and there is there's a technology component of this that becomes really important. And we've talked about this before, Zach, and there's so many different areas of marketing. Obviously there's the creative side, which I know is a big reason why you got into this field. And then on the flip side, there's weirdos like me who the data piece is really the part that drew me into the field, given my background in finance and that whole side. So there's a real need, I think, for analytical people in this field, because it will allow companies to be a lot more thoughtful about the way that they are using data to personalize the experiences. So if you're listening to this and you haven't thought of maybe marketing as a field that you wanted to go into, but you're a very data and analytical driven person, I would highly encourage you to think about this, because I think there's an awesome opportunity, and it's only going to get more and more necessary for strong data and analytical people to be in this field as we look to personalize more and more as we move forward.
I totally agree. And this talk of data brings us to our last point. And if you missed last week's episode, give that a listen. But artificial intelligence, AI, this is a great way to personalize content at scale. You have all these different data points. AI is still relatively new. I'm sure there's some kind of AI tool that helps with personalization. I'm thinking of I've seen different email tools that help you with the subject line and the content, or even a social media post based on your campaign. But I think AI is a great way to scale this content. Just exactly what we talked about today, with a little help from AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know we talked about some of the AI tools that are built into the Meta Ads platform a few weeks ago, and we were expressing some concern around just completely handing over everything to the AI and letting Advantage Plus just run all your campaigns. But that is an area where where Meta can help with personalization, especially around things like where people are actually engaging with your content and what placements they should be on. And that's going to be driven based off of the data and where people have engaged with your content in the past. So as we've said a million times though, please make sure that your content is formatted for all of those different placements. And Zach gave some great tips on how to make that happen last week with tools like Canva, with some of their AI that's built in. But if you are going to be running ads on Meta platforms, definitely look to leverage some of that Advantage Plus piece so that you can do personalized content at scale, at least from a placement perspective, on where those ads are going to be seen.
And Gabe, that's really all the time we have today. If there's anything to take away from this conversation, number one, use LinkedIn. I still am cracking up over this LinkedIn conversation. Number two, I need to buy a new water filter for my fridge. And number three, personalize your marketing messaging and use the data you have to do that. If you're not using data, if you're not collecting data, make sure you have that data or have the ability to collect that data as well. I think there's so many takeaways, not only from personalization, but the data, the segments that drive that personalization. These are not separate conversations, I don't think, Gabe. So a lot of valuable resources.
They're super entwined together. It's the data and the segmentation allows you to do personalization at scale. So that's the thing I would really think about as you're thinking about how these things work together, is they are very, very intertwined.
Absolutely. Well, Gabe, that is all the time we had this week. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in with us. And don't forget to give us a follow on your favorite podcast app. We'll be back again next week with a new episode. And again, follow us on YouTube as well if you'd like to catch the latest video podcast as well.